with Mike Heller.
Broadcasting live from an undisclosed bunker in the Badger State, this is I Love Mondays with Mike Heller. Powered by determination and a little bit of duct tape. Here's your host, Mike Heller.
So here we go on a Friday, wrapping up week one of the I Love Mondays podcast. I will tell you out of the gate on Monday, if you consume this podcast live, thank you. And if you want to communicate with us, if you're watching it on YouTube or on X, Twitter Live, just send a comment on that feed and we'll get that replied to or look at it. Or if it's not worthy, it won't be worthy. But if it's worthy, we'll see if we can't get you mentioned. On Monday, the live version of this goes to 10 a.m. So made two rather significant errors, if you want to call them that, in week one. I went ahead with the name of the show being called I Love Mondays, even though it's Monday through Friday. And I switched the starting time from 2 p.m. for the first 5 shows to 10 a.m. after that. So, yeah, we're going to roll with that concept. I got to tell you, we're going to visit with Pete Doherty a little bit later on. And Pete's just simply one of my favorites. He's been with the Green Bay Press Gazette since 1987. He is just a good dude, and he knows what he's talking about. And listen, if you read him, you understand. I have a great deal of reverence for him and appreciation, and some of the relationships that I have with folks in the media. It's nice when they say yes. So Pete's going to be on, plenty to get to, certainly on the loss of Bob Harlan, but also on what is going on right now, which is kind of goofy on the Rashan Gary front. Very few of us expect Rashan Gary back next year, but Gary put out this direct Instagram post of a goodbye to the Green Bay Packers, that his time in Green Bay was done. Then it was pulled down, and now he's saying his Instagram was hacked. And the original reports, whether from all of the traditional daily Green Bay Packers sports media, were all that the Packers have, were going to be releasing or have released Rashan Gary. And then the storyline changed. We don't know if the Packers have released him or traded him, but all things are on the table. But Gary's time in Green Bay is over, to now going, we're not exactly sure what's going on. So I think that's where we sit in the moment, is that Rashan Gary is almost certainly not back in Green Bay. But that Instagram post that came from Gary's account has kind of muddied the waters on what is happening and how it's happened, or what's going to happen. We certainly know this, that by the time we get through the weekend and we're back live and on your podcast, wherever you get your podcasts, beginning on Monday when we go at 10 a.m., things are going to be happening. The league takes this opportunity for next week and in this weekend for a ton of things to happen. They don't become league official until Wednesday, but there's a lot of the legal tampering that goes on, and a lot of stories and a lot of reporting that will go on Saturday, Sunday, Monday, Tuesday into Wednesday. And the NFL is really smart. They never leave the front page. The front page is a reference to when they used to have newspapers. They never leave the front page. The NFL is really good about managing the calendar, and they're going to be all over the calendar, even though the World Baseball Classic's going on in spring training and conference tournaments in college hoop, and Selection Sunday is 9 days away. The NFL will steal a lot of headlines on Sunday, Monday, and Tuesday, and I'm curious as to whether the Packers will be part of the headline making. Traditionally not in this window. And I've always kind of thought in this window that those who are making the most noise are the teams that are the worst and typically irrelevant when it gets to October, November, and December, and certainly January football. But we've seen the Rams be active in these windows. We've seen the Packers have done a little bit more. Certainly the Bears were active in this window a year ago, and then they won the division. So we'll see how that plays. I also wanted to share my thoughts on Bob Harlan before we, in a little bit, bring in Pete Doherty. So Bob Harlan, for 19 years, he was the president of the Green Bay Packers. We all know Kevin Harlan, his son, who was one of the great announcers in sports, period, in many sports. But Bob Harlan is one of those guys who sometimes nice guys you just applaud them for being, man, is that a nice dude, nice lady, nice man. You just talk about how kind they are and approachable and make you feel comfortable. Well, Bob Harlan was that. But if he's just that, it's not nearly the story. He is both. We lost him yesterday at the age of 89. Isn't that something? In back-to-back days, Lou Holtz and then Bob Harlan, both at 89 years old, both had dramatic impacts on their sports in far different ways. But Bob Harlan made you feel like he was your friend and you were his. I wasn't. I mean, I never had a lunch with Bob, but every time I had a chance to visit with Bob Harlan, and in the early goings on, when I was working in television in Wisconsin, it's not untrue that Bob Harlan would answer his phone in the office. Now, I'm talking about cell phones. They didn't have them. But in his office, he answered his phone. And if he didn't, he returned your phone call. Some might say, well, isn't that expected? No, it's not. It's not the way it works, typically. He's a brilliant man who had an incredible amount of impact on who the Green Bay Packers are and who they might not have been had Bob Harlan been there. Had Bob Harlan not been in Green Bay, I don't know that the Packers are still there. It's not hyperbole. We'll talk about that with Pete Doherty, but it's a tremendous loss, but a life and a profession to be celebrated in the times of Bob Harlan and what he means to the Green Bay Packers as an organization and a franchise. I don't know how you structure it, but he's on the non-playing Mount Rushmore for the Green Bay Packers. His importance cannot be understated. So it is. There's a sadness, but a celebration there for Bob Harlan. And then I also wanted to touch on. So I had a back and forth, and I'll do this on Twitter. I had a back and forth with somebody because I had it's NMB, New Mexico Badger on Twitter. I had a back and forth because yesterday my Badger Connect weekly podcast. It's going to be an interview each week that goes on Thursday at badgerconnect.com. The first one was a sit-down interview with Luke and Amy Fickell, the Badger football coach, and his wife in their home. And the goal of that interview weekly on the Badger Connect podcast is to give you a backstory, to let them tell you about who they are, how they got here, how their relationship evolved in this case, because it's a husband and wife. So in that interview, there was a reference that my wife Kari went to a Badger game and usually does one time a year with one of the coach's wives. And in this case, that is Megan Tressel. Mike Tressel is Wisconsin's defensive coordinator. So this dude, NMB, kind of got after me on Twitter because he said, love listening to your podcast with Luke Fickell, but I find it interesting that we hear about how Wisconsin was at an unfair advantage with dollars, but you didn't talk about Minnesota, Maryland, and Iowa. Do they actually have more money? And I said, there's no transparency, so we don't know. And then he followed up, and this is where it got a little contentious, but I'll go back and forth on these. He said, is it hard being objective when you're friends with the Fickells and other members of the coaching staff? So can I pull back the curtain? Ben Beno, are you okay if I pull a little curtain back here?
Pull away.
So I like and hope for the success of Luke Fickell. I respect him. I don't think he would call me his friend or me call him my friend. I hope he's successful. I've never sat down and had a lunch or a drink with Luke in a social setting. Would I would I say that we're friends, Kari and I, with Amy? We're friendly. Kari is, I would think she would call Amy a friend. Again, I don't think that they've sat down across from one another and shared a bottle of wine or a lunch or a coffee, but they talk, and our businesses do a couple of things as it relates to one another. I don't think that friendship comes into play here. Like, my objectivity in talking about Wisconsin football or basketball, like, I've defended Greg Gard over the course of time. And the reason I've defended him is because I think he's a good basketball coach. I think he's a good coach in a great program. I think what he's done at the times when he was embattled, I still didn't think he's not a good coach. I like Greg. Would I call Greg Gard a friend? Again, I haven't sat across from him socially on our own time for a lunch or a dinner. We've been involved in social situations, but they're work related. So the question that he raised is, can you be objective and have the friendship at the same time? And I would start by saying I'm friendly with coaches and coaches' families at times. Certainly friendly with some more than others, but I don't think it impacts my objectivity. And I would ask, in that case, if you do think that that's the case, then give me the receipts. Show me where you think that my personal relationship, if I had one, impacts or discolors my reporting or opinion on them. I'll take you back to one other one as it relates to this. When Paul Chryst was fired after the Illinois game, I like Paul Chryst. I think he's still a tremendous coach, not coaching anymore, but I didn't think that was about Paul Chryst, the coach. I thought it was about Paul Chryst, the planner, Paul Chryst, the adapter to NIL and portal and things that were evolving. I was surprised he was fired, but I wasn't in the room. The following of that is that I thought Jim Leonhard was going to get the job, and I thought he should have gotten the job. I had no qualms. You could think two things at the same time, that I wanted Jim Leonhard to get the job because I thought he earned it and I thought it would be the right play. But I wasn't upset or angry that they hired Luke Fickell. Both things could mean Luke Fickell was the candidate at the time to be hired. So I didn't have a problem with it, but I thought that Jim Leonhard should have gotten the job in the moment. So objectivity and friendships, NMB on Twitter, you don't know what my relationship is with these coaches. So don't call me out for saying, does your friendship cloud your objectivity? Because you don't know. And then B, if you think I'm not being objective, then just let me know. But don't put it in that context. So you don't know that. Very, very few people in sports media are actually friends with the people they cover. You can be friendly without being friends. That makes sense? Anyway, it kind of rubbed me the wrong way. We went back and forth because he had said that you yourself said that your wife goes to games with the Trestles. She went to one game with Megan and Kari, and I'm friends with Megan, but I haven't shared a paragraph of conversation with Mike Tressel. But I like Megan, and I'm sure I would like Mike. But there is a barrier. I don't really cross it, and certainly the coaches don't. But yeah, I would consider Megan a friend. So he said, if you're pals, and then I said, he had said, you blame money and injuries, but can you admit that poor coaching has also been an issue under Coach Fickell? And I didn't reply. And then dude comes back and says, Mike won't answer. He won't admit that his friends have struggled at their jobs. And I said, I'm not going to debate you on Twitter about objectivity and friendship. I personally like many of the players and coaches I cover and talk about. I consider some, very few, to be honest, as friends. And I think my record on objectivity will speak for itself. And then he's asking then he asked back if I would admit that Coach Fickell and coaching have failed so far. And again, I didn't reply. And he said, shocker, he won't say anything negative about the football staff, but he's objective. Sarcastically, I assumed is what that meant. So I replied one more time, and then I'll get on with the show. I said, Wisconsin football over the last 3 years has made a lot of mistakes, from a bad fit offensive coordinator for 2 years to an offensive line that has not been good enough. Add to that being underfunded on player retention and acquisition. 2026 is a major make or break season for the head coach and the program. And I hashtagged it Captain Obvious. I don't have to say that. Everybody that follows the program knows how important 2026 is. You know, last year during later portion of the season, when it was announced that Luke Fickell was going to be coming back, Ted Kellner kind of made the tour, the radio car wash, as we call it. I wasn't working on a daily show at the time, but Ted Kellner said that Wisconsin was bottom third in the Big Ten in player financial pay last year. Bottom third. There's 18 teams. That means they're in the lower six. He said they would be in the top third this year, which is pretty heady stuff when you consider the money that we don't know because it's not transparent, but when you assume the money that Ohio State, Michigan, Penn State, Oregon, USC, and Indiana spend, that Wisconsin would be top third. So, yeah, I think it's fairly obvious that 2026 is a significant season for Wisconsin football in many fronts, but certainly as it relates to the job security of the head coach. Luke Fickell is going to coach his fourth year at Wisconsin. My guess is that they're going to be a 7 or 8 win team. Maybe better. Maybe I think 7 would be a fair betting line. 8 is doable. Notre Dame to open the season, we'll learn something there. But certainly the Big Ten schedule as it stacks up is not what it was a year ago when Wisconsin played the nation's most difficult college football schedule. So we'll get a handle on these things as they roll forward. I just wanted to share that conversation. And as we roll forward, if at any time on X or during the show you want to communicate, you can send the message. You know, if you communicate with me on Twitter, I always have that open. So I'll go back and forth with you. And I wasn't angry at NMB, but I just felt like he took some liberties on trying to be presumptuous about how I would classify my relationship with coaches. Anyway, so a little pull back the curtain on that front. Let me tell you about our sponsors on I Love Mondays, because it is important to me who we are related to and our friendship on the sponsors side of this show. And it begins with our presenting sponsors. Our presenting sponsors are Neuroscience Group, excellence in brain, spine, and pain care. Choose Neuroscience Group in northeastern Wisconsin. From diagnosis to recovery, Neuroscience Group brings together neurology, neurosurgery, pain management, and therapy all under one roof. Advanced care close to home. Neuroscience Group, northeastern Wisconsin's leader in neurological care. Also, we are presented by M3 Insurance. At M3, they help businesses and individuals manage risk, purchase insurance, and provide the right benefits to their employees. So if you're in that position with the company, whether you own a company or in the position to be purchasing insurance and benefits for your employees, reach out to m3ins.com. A valuable resource for you, and certainly a relationship that we have with them that I would like to continue to further. And how that works is for you, if you support this podcast, is also to support our sponsors. We're also brought to you in part by Potawatomi Sportsbook and Casino. Bet above the rest at Potawatomi Casino Hotel. It's time to play. Pick your game from slots to poker to the best sportsbook anywhere and more. Enjoy restaurants, bars, a luxurious hotel just steps from the action. Learn more at Potawatomi.com. Must be 21 to enter the casino. And also brought to you with one of our partners by Habish and Rotier. 13 locations ensure you get a hometown attorney who understands your life and the impacts of your injury and is personally committed to your recovery. So this guy is one of my favorites, Pete Doherty, and we get to talk again. We've visited for a lot of years. Pete Doherty at the Green Bay Press-Gazette, and you've been there since 1987. So I appreciate our relationship and you always saying yes over the years in radio and now saying yes on my podcast. So welcome in. You're my first Packers guest at the end of week one to talk about what's going on. How are you?
Doing great, Mike. And hey, we'll do some joking and having fun as the time goes on here. But honestly, it's really cool to be on in your first week, and this is really neat that you're doing this. And I hope you'll have me back on quite a bit in the future.
Careful what you wish for, because that's going to happen. I'm going to make that phone call. That text message is going to be fairly regular. Let's start out on, and for some, it certainly is a sad passing of Bob Harlan, but I'm going to choose to celebrate because this man and his importance to the Green Bay Packers franchise cannot be overstated, because he is and always will be that important to who the Green Bay Packers are. And you were front and center for all of it, his entire time in Green Bay.
Yeah, the Packers have had a few just incredibly dire times financially. So, his never got to that point. There was when they had to incorporate, when Turnbull, who was the Press-Gazette publisher, Green Bay Press-Gazette publisher, he funded their end of the season debts and then, put together the corporation that is the Packers Corporation now. And, they went to receivership in the 30s. They were on their deathbed a couple times. It never quite reached that with Harlan, but it was headed in that direction. And with all that losing in the 70s and 80s,
yeah,
they could have easily lost this team if that had continued. If the NFL just thought they were an anchor, that would have been it. And the NFL would have found a way to make it happen. And they would have moved to Milwaukee or somewhere else, and they wouldn't be in Green Bay. And, the structure change was really important. But the big thing was, that Harlan made when he hired Wolf. But the big thing was they had just had so many bad hires in the 70s and 80s for running their football team. And Harlan made the structure change because he knew he needed to do that to hire a highly, highly competent, respected football guy in Ron Wolf. And he just cast all that stuff aside and made the move. And everything that's happened since is a trickle down from that. And whenever you walk over to Lambeau Field and Titletown and all that stuff you see, that all started with Bob Harlan hiring Wolf, the Packers turning things around, winning the Super Bowl, having the stock sale so they could refurbish Lambeau Field, which brought in revenue, which allowed them to do more refurbishing. And it's just a domino effect there. And it all started with Bob Harlan's big decision to fire Tom Bratz and hire Ron Wolf and do whatever it took to get that football team turned around.
Pete, in the 19 years, and I'm going to have you expound a little bit on changing a bit of the structure, because the board of directors was involved in football-related decisions until they weren't. And they were not involved in those football-related decisions when Bob Harlan made the choice to hire Ron Wolf. And Ron Wolf has said it many times. He would have never have come to Green Bay if he wouldn't have had full control over football-related decisions. And that came from Bob Harlan, right?
Yeah. So he didn't tell the executive committee what his plan was. This is in like November of 91. He went into the executive committee and said he couldn't do it unilaterally, at least theoretically. He just said, this is what I want to do. And he said they had, I think it was 6 board members and 5 said, or executive committee members, sorry. That's a subgroup of the board. Okay,
right.
And they said, 5 of them said yes. 1 of them objected. Now that 5-1 was enough, but they convinced the one holdout, who was Don Schneider from Schneider National Trucking. He wanted to do a search for a new GM. And the rest of the committee sided with Harlan. They talked Schneider into voting with them, so it was unanimous. And Harlan told them, look, I'm going to put in writing that he gets to hire and fire the coach, which in effect means he's running football. But Harlan said, I'm going to tell him that if he wants to make a football move, that he can do it as long as it's not a financial issue. And I didn't know this until reading, I think it was Tom Silverstein's story this morning, that the Packers had a policy in place where if they were going to trade a first round pick, the executive committee had to approve it. And so when Wolf wanted to trade for Brett Favre, Harlan went to the executive committee and said, look, he's going to do this. I promised him that he could do what he wanted with football decisions. So we've got to let him do it. And, it sounds like they weren't thrilled about it, but, they let him do it. And then, everything worked out. So Harlan's credibility and Wolf's credibility skyrocketed. But yeah, it was a big change for this organization, both in the way that, the structure running things rather than the 50-50 coach GM split. And they hired someone who was really highly respected and just a really good football man in Ron Wolf. And that changed everything.
I equate it, and you have a UW background, I equate it to when Donna Shalala hired Pat Richter at the University of Wisconsin, because Pat Richter then hired Barry Alvarez and then later hired Stu Jackson, that led to hiring Dick Bennett, that led to hiring Bo Ryan. All those things mattered. But the first thing that mattered, Donna Shalala, which in this case would be like the Bob Harlan, had to put the right person in place. Yeah. And in Green Bay, that was Ron Wolf. Here it was Pat Richter. And then all of the things that happened afterwards are a result of those initial decisions, of which in Green Bay, Bob Harlan is front and center.
Yeah, it's the first domino. And it's, that gets the whole thing going. And, it's not just, I didn't say this before, but it's not just, you go over to Lambeau and you see that, all the cool stuff they've done to the stadium and you see the Titletown district, but you look at the scouting department, and the guy who runs the scouting department is a Wolf protege. I mean, they're still being run by Ron, the whole time. Even Mike Sherman, you have to call him a Wolf protege because Wolf hired him for the couple of years that he was GM. And Ted Thompson, obviously, Wolf hired him in 93. So it was, I guess, 92. So, that's, and Brian Gutekunst now. So it's that through line still runs through. And, if they keep winning, eventually Gutekunst's successor is probably going to be somebody he hired. And so who knows how long this chain will keep going. And it's all from that first domino of Harlan making that move and hiring Ron Wolf.
Some people might misconstrue this, but I'm going to say it the way I say it, and then you can expound upon it. If he doesn't have success, if Bob Harlan's Green Bay Packers aren't successful with the things that he helped set up on the referendum and the Don Hutson Center and the hiring of Ron Wolf and so on and so forth, we're not talking about what an incredibly nice man he is and was, because it would be, he was a good guy, but, they had to move on. He was that rare combination, Pete, of somebody who is incredibly business savvy and work driven, but also one of the kindest men, nicest men you're ever going to come across in your life.
I wonder if I've been thinking about basically this for a couple of days now, and maybe that was kind of his, superpower,
Sure.
The credibility that gave him with people, because he is a really rare bird that way. I mean, I know when they hired him, when the executive committee hired him to be president, he has said that what the executive committee's concern, which they asked him about, a bunch of times in his interview, was, he's too nice a guy? Is he tough enough to make the hard decisions?
Right. And
in November of 91, he did it. He fired Tom Bratz. How often do GMs get fired during the season? That never happens. Right. And he hired Wolf. I mean, that was a tough decision. Pulling out of Milwaukee, that was a really tough decision, because Milwaukee had helped keep the Packers alive for decades. Those people from Milwaukee had a right to be really upset by that, but it was something the Packers had to do. They were leaving too much money on the table by playing 3 games down there. Plus, it was a disadvantage, a competitive disadvantage to basically play 3 extra road games and 3 less home games, for the travel they had to do there for the players. That was a really tough decision, but he made it, and he made it work. And, he was as Ron Wolf has said, he was an honest man. He kept his word. He was a really rare bird that way. Because you're right, if he had failed, he just would have been, a nice guy who failed. But he made the hard decision. And, like if Wolf hadn't been the right, let's just say he had missed on that hire, he would have, if the football didn't improve, he knew, this team was headed, into financial trouble and possible an existential problem.
Yeah.
He probably would have had I'm guessing he would have had the strength to fire Wolf too, but he just made an exceptional hire, and everything, like we said, everything's taken off from there.
Two things that I want to touch on there. One, Kevin Harlan went on some shows during the Super Bowl week. One of them was Jim Rome's show, and he talked about that his dad had relayed to him that the CFO came in the first or second year that Bob was in that role and said, we're going to be broke in 3 years, and just kind of left it there. And I don't know that how many people were fully aware of the financial trouble that they were in. And if the Packers would have continued to go down that slope, the NFL wouldn't have hesitated, I don't think, would they have to have relocated a moribund, financially destitute franchise in by far the smallest market and to have relocated in?
No, I'm sure there were many owners who wanted to do that. So John Underwood is the treasurer that you're talking about. He was the president of a local bank up here. And so after they got the whole, the Lambeau project, it basically started in 97 when they sold stock that summer. And then in, I think it was 99, they had to get the sales tax passed, and they started the project, and it finished it was done in stages, but the whole thing was finished, I think, in 2003. And in 2004, Underwood said that the Packers were headed, without that project, they were headed for financial oblivion. That was the word he used, oblivion. And, I've talked with the former, Paul Jaden was the mayor at that time, and I've talked to him since then. And he said that he basically, the way he put it was, if they hadn't done that project, then by, not much after 2010, the Packers wouldn't have lasted in Green Bay much longer than 2010. They would have had to move. Just think how different this world would look.
Right?
What's that?
I mean, you're winning at that time.
Yeah.
I mean, it's not like the 70s and 80s where the team couldn't win. In that era, they're financially in trouble, but they're winning at the same time. Kind of goofy. Yeah,
it's just, it has to do with that. The arms race had started for bringing in income outside of ticket sales and TV. You had to bring in money other ways. That was through luxury boxes, club seats, things built around the stadium that you own. I mean, that's why it's morphed into the Titletown project, because they're doing as well as anybody as far as owning the property around their stadium and running and having, renting out to businesses and things like that. And, they had to have capital to be able to do that. And what gave them that capital was refurbishing Lambeau Field. And what allowed them to refurbish Lambeau Field was having a stock sale in 97. What allowed them to have that was winning the Super Bowl in 96. And what allowed that was hiring Ron Wolf in November 91.
Isn't that crazy? And then before we leave on, Bob, this is a quintessential radio or podcast topic. If you took players off the board, would Bob Harlan be on your Green Bay Packers Mount Rushmore? Just take players off the board here, separate Rushmore there. Non-playing important people in Packers history. Is Bob Harlan one of the four?
He might be. I was just I was talking about that with somebody the other day. Well, we didn't take players off the board, so I said no, because there'd be a player or two that you'd have to have on there. But we're talking Lambeau and Lombardi, obviously.
Yes.
And then I think Turnbull would have to be on there for keeping this team alive, in 1921 or whatever year it was when they had the rainstorm that canceled the last game.
Yeah.
But it was like an 1/8 of an inch or 1/16 of an inch too short of them being able to collect their insurance policy. So he paid off all their bills. And then that off season, they came up with the idea of incorporating the stock sale and, all that stuff. So he would have to be on there. Then it's a question of whether it's Harlan or one of the other guys in the 20s or 30s, because they were on their deathbed a couple of times. I think there's a good argument. There's a pretty good argument for Harlan because of just how he's the crucial role he played in, what's there now and what the Packers are now. And now they're a crown jewel of the league. They're not just, limping along. And I mean, they are one of the 3 or 4 marquee franchises in the league for many reasons, including the really cool story that they're in little old Green Bay and the stadium sits in the middle of a neighborhood on the west side of Green Bay. So I think there's a pretty good argument that he would be that fourth guy. Yeah.
Pete, let's talk about what's going on today. Now, there's some misinformation going on out here. Rashan Gary made a post saying that his time in Green Bay was done. And then, the reporters on social media saying the Packers have released. Now we're saying we don't know that the Packers have released Rashan Gary. In the moment, what's going on with Rashan Gary? And can we make the assumption that regardless of how this, who said it, who did it, whatever, that his time in Green Bay is indeed done?
I pretty much am. I mean, you never know. The Packers are saying he hasn't been traded, hasn't been released. Those things are on the table. The fact that Gary put that out there sure makes it look like, he thinks it's done, even though he did pull it back, it sounds like.
Well, now they're saying, now that he's saying, or his people are saying that his Instagram was hacked. So,
okay. Well, I didn't see that. Things are changing by the minute here, huh?
Yes, it is.
Yeah. But who knows?
If we cut through that minutia, you would be of the mindset that his time in Green Bay is done.
I have thought that all offseason. I've thought that since late last season. I don't know that for a fact. Maybe they're trying to work out a pay cut with him. Maybe I still think they're probably just trying to trade him, and so they're waiting until the last second. But I don't know why anybody would want to pick up that contract. I think he's due like $19 or $20 million.
Correct.
In salary and bonus. He's a good player, but he's not a $20 million player.
And I don't believe that money's guaranteed, right? I don't think the money is guaranteed. No. So if you're taking on the contract, why would you? If that were the case, you'd wait for Green Bay to release him.
Exactly.
Then you're not responsible for that money. Green Bay's got dead cap money, but that money's not guaranteed going forward.
Correct. So it'd be cheaper just to wait. And, I'm sure that's what teams are, that's the Packers. It happens all the time where you see reports somebody's trying to trade a guy. Well, nobody trades for him because they know everybody knows they're going to cut the guy. So why give up, any assets to get the guy? So I still think he's going to be cut. I find it really hard to believe he won't be, but maybe they're trying to work out a pay cut with him. I still think they're just trying to, like I said, I think they're just trying to trade him and they're waiting until the last second. But, I have to admit, if he's on the Packers next season, I'll be stunned.
So let's kind of go backwards and talk about what has happened since the season ended on an unimaginable finish in Chicago in a game that Green Bay seemingly had fairly good control of. What does this offseason look like? And I'll have you go back and talk about the extension that was given to Gutekunst and LaFleur and give me your sense, your opinion on what Ed Policy was thinking there and going ahead and doing your opinion and that storyline as it played early in the offseason.
Yeah, so starting with that, I thought after that last game and with the way the season ended, those last 5 games, I thought, a month ago I would have said he'll be back. I wonder if he's going to end up getting fired. Talk about LaFleur. And I was guessing that I thought odds were that he would get fired. Now, I think Policy, the 2 main things in Policy's mind were, one, he really liked the Love LaFleur relationship or the how well they work together. Right. He thinks Love is headed in a good direction. He didn't want to mess with that. We all know how important the quarterback play is to an NFL team. So he didn't want to mess with that. And I totally get that. And, even though he'd been working there, he hadn't worked and sat in some of the meetings where it's just the president, the GM and the coach. And he came away from those liking the way that Gutekunst and LaFleur worked together from what he saw. It sounds to me like those were the 2 big reasons why he made the extension. He thought their best chance for the next couple of years was keeping that together. And he didn't want to put Gutekunst above LaFleur after, as a GM, Ron Wolf type GM, after they had worked together for, I think it's 7 years they've worked together. He didn't want to change that. So that was his thinking. If it's my call outside looking in, I think I would have made the change at coach, but I'm not in those meetings and I'm not in the offices. So maybe he saw something. Maybe he saw something where he was, he made the right decision. We'll know in 2 years, right? If this thing doesn't move along and they don't advance from where they are right now in the next 2 years, I've got to think that then a change is coming. But policy's there and he sees it. So he sees what's going on behind closed doors. So it's his call, and I mean he'll it's his responsibility, and we'll see how it works out.
If I took you back to that early December when the Packers are 9-3-1 and have a 2-score lead in Denver, at that moment, did you think that Green Bay was a potential Super Bowl team? And how was just the injury to Micah Parsons that damaging to what ended up happening the rest of the way?
I thought they were a possible Super Bowl team. I wouldn't have said that they were the NFC favorite by any means. I mean, after those first 2 games, I was like everybody else, right? I mean, it was just like, wow, these guys are going to be good. And they were still struggling in their own ways and still trying to find their way a little bit offensively. And their defense was good, but not great. They struck me as a team that could get hot down the stretch and they could be as good as anybody. So that injury was, that was just devastating. There was no way after Parsons got hurt, there was basically no way they were going to the Super Bowl. His impact was too profound for that.
Yeah, and then even in the playoff loss in Chicago, without him and without Devontae Wyatt, and then having Edgerrin Cooper go down in the game, still it was hard to stomach how it happened. But let me fast forward now. Are you bullish on who Green Bay will be when we don't know what they're going to be from a roster makeup. They might do some things in free agency by this time next week. They could have made 2 or 3 moves of some significance. So only knowing what we know today, are you bullish on who they can be in 26?
Yeah, pretty much. They have to make some moves. They've got to get better at some positions, defensive tackle, corner, or just add an outstanding player at any position. That always makes a difference. Doesn't matter what position the guy plays. But yeah, I'm pretty bullish. I mean, the Parsons injury coming back from an ACL, man, that's tough. And guys aren't, it's tough to come back and be what you were. It does seem like though, that these super hyper talented guys come back better from these injuries than other guys. I think he's still got a chance to come back. And if he's not quite what he was, he still can be a very dominant player. And he'll probably miss 3 or 4 games, I'm guessing. But as long as Love's curve keeps going up, I think he's pretty good. I know there's opinions across the board. I think he's pretty good, and there's a lot of talent there. He still has a lot to prove, but if that curve keeps going up with him, I think there's enough talent out there with some savvy moves this offseason where, their chances should be probably as good as anybody's. They're not there as we speak today, but a lot of important things are going to be happening in the next 2 weeks and then the draft too.
Well, on the offensive line, if you go under the assumption that Rasheed Walker is gone and Jordan Morgan is the heir apparent at left tackle, can Aaron Banks be what they thought he was going to be last year? Injuries probably derailed that at some level. But if you went Jordan Morgan at left tackle and you had Banks and Zach Tom as the 3 cornerstones of the offensive line, is there enough there in your view for the offensive line to not be an issue?
Yeah, I'm not sure. The Banks, that was a huge disappointment. That was a lot of money spent on a guy who was, I don't know, was he even an average starter? Probably not. Right. Probably not quite. Now you're right. He got hurt the first day of camp. Hurt his back. So that did hurt things. At the end of the year, he was playing better. Maybe he was probably playing at an average level. I'm not sure if there's enough there or not, and I'll be really curious to see what they do at center. Whether they re-sign Sean Ryan to do that, or do they go into free agency and sign an $8 to $11 million guy? Yeah. Do they spring huge and go after Tyler Linderbaum. Is it Tyler? I can't remember now. Linderbaum, the best free agent center. It's so hard to read what Gutekunst has been a little unpredictable in what he's done in the off seasons and free agency. So I'm a little scared to ever make any predictions on what he's going to do. But you know what? It'll mostly come down to whether Jordan Morgan's good enough, I guess. And you know, he looked pretty decent out there in camp. It's the most natural position. But you know, being out there for every snap against the best rushers in the league, that's you know, that's a different story. So we probably won't know until October, November whether he's good enough.
So I want to ask you a question that you already just kind of answered, because it's hard to predict what Brian Gutekunst is going to do. But by the time we get to Wednesday and the teams get to announce the moves that they've made, the league is going to have a big shuffling of the deck. Sunday, Monday, Tuesday is significant in newsmakers in the NFL. And the Packers have done some things in the past in this window. Do you have an anticipation or a belief set that they're going to be the Packers version of aggressive? Right. I know I did this to you right after you said you're trying to predict Brian Gutekunst doesn't work.
You know, because I've tried to map this out, and it could go so many different ways. You know, they've got all those, they're going to lose all these good players. So they're going to get these compensatory picks in 27. So you sign unrestricted free agents, that counts against the formula. So you start degrading that some. So one way they could go is they could sign guys who are getting cut now, and that won't count against their compensatory formula. And then they could make a couple significant moves there. The Lions cut 2 defensive tackles. I could see him signing one of those 2 guys. I think one was 31 and one's 33. You sign them to 1-year deals, you know. They could go small, you know, $5-6 million guys and lose their late round compensatory picks in 27, but still get the 3rd and 4th rounders. They could swing really big on somebody and lose, you know, the 3rd rounder they might get for Malik Willis or Rasheed Walker. So there are so many ways they could go, and they have a lot of positions they need help on. Corner is huge. Defensive tackle is huge. Linebacker. They need a backup tackle, though I'm guessing the draft will be where they go for that. You know, I've looked at the list of players, and there's so many different tactics. You know, they could go swing big for one guy and then a couple very small guys. They could go for a bunch of intermediate price guys. So I'm open to expecting anything and everything. You know, maybe it'll be a first day signing. Maybe it'll be day 2 or 3, the 3 guys signing, you know, because then it gets a little cheaper. But honestly, and I've called around and asked a little bit and haven't caught any rumors on what they're thinking. This could go so many different ways. And Gutekunst has done it multiple different ways. And he's not Ted Thompson. He actually will get active at times.
Yeah. Do you think Romeo Doubs is going to find that pot of gold somewhere that Green Bay can't match?
I've been assuming he will. And I know I've seen some things recently where there's, you know, the possible, I'd be stunned if he's back, but because usually if you don't re-sign a guy who there's going to have any kind of demand, if you don't re-sign him by the time free agency starts, that's it, he's gone. Free agency hasn't started yet, but you know, I just don't see why they didn't. He's a good player, but why? I don't see why they would invest in him. They drafted 2 receivers last year. They've got you know, a couple guys. I mean, Christian Watson is looking like he's going to be a good player. Jaden Reed. You know, there's 4 guys right there. Wicks. It doesn't, with all their other needs, it doesn't make sense investing. I mean, what Doubs is going to cost? I don't know. What do you think? $8 million a year to $12 million a year, something like that, right?
I think it's going to be in the 10 plus. I think. Yeah,
that just makes no sense to me. Does it to you? I don't know.
Yeah. It's going to be one of those where I think the dollar dictates what you're going to do there, and it only takes one to offer him where Green Bay says, hey, we'd love to, but we can't. And then it changes the equation. So, and this very interesting time for a franchise that could have transitioned. And I'm not bothered that they didn't transition. You and I are sort of pretty close to in lockstep on what I thought was going to happen when the season ended, because I thought that they would make the decision to transition to a new head coach. But I do think that they can run it back and still be in a position when you get to December to be a deep NFC playoff caliber team and maybe beyond. But there are just too many unknowns right now. But I think that the core, if you had Micah Parsons back and healthy and Tucker Kraft back and healthy and Edgerrin Cooper playing fully healthy and Devontae Wyatt, that this team has plenty of ability to be a deep NFC team type of team.
Yeah, and they're still fairly young. I mean, God, they were the youngest team in the league last year still.
Yeah.
So
that ended up being the focus when Goody had his availability, was talking about the, essentially nobody over the age of 30 concept.
Yeah. And, and I as a general approach to putting together a football team, I think that's the way to do it. It's the ultimate young man's game. I mean, George Young, the Hall of Fame GM from the Giants, he was famous for saying the NFL is like the Marines, the younger, the better,
Yeah, right.
So they have young guys who at least theoretically, potentially can keep, the curve going up and improving. And all it takes is, a couple players to make a nice jump, and a team can change pretty significantly. So that's why basically you summed up better than I did the reasons to be bullish on this team. Not saying that they're not going to be the favorite for the Super Bowl going into the season or anything like that, but certainly there's potential there for them to be, a really good team, and a lot of it rides on internal improvement and Jordan Love keeping that curve going up.
Pete, I mean this. Thanks for doing this. I appreciate it. It's good to have people that you call friends in the business, and I say that about you. I appreciate your work, and I say thank you for jumping in here. And you open the door, so I am going to call you. You might get tired of me, but we're going to keep doing this, and I appreciate it.
Yeah, again, in all seriousness, Mike, I just think this is really cool. You got this going, and I love talking sports and Packers with you. And I'm not exaggerating when I say call anytime.
Very good. Thank you, Pete. Pete Doherty, simply favorites. Love what he does. Appreciate that he said yes into jumping in here. And, let me update the Rashan Gary storyline, because it really is a little goofy right now. So Gary posted, and after he posted his Instagram post with the farewell to Green Bay, well written, great picture, then the daily media began to say, hey, obviously we don't know if he's been released or traded, but all things are on the table. But Rashan Gary's time in Green Bay is done. Everybody's, caution is the operative word here. They've all pulled back on that this is a done deal. And Gary came out and said, essentially through his people, that his Instagram was hacked. I don't think he's coming back to Green Bay, and I doubt that it was hacked, but it could be. So will Green Bay trade Rashan Gary? When Pete and I were talking about that, I doubt that he's going to be traded, because why would somebody give up capital to get him? And if you trade for him, you trade for him under the current contract. So wait for him to be released, and then you can negotiate a deal as a street free agent to figure that out. So little goofy what's going on there right now. By the way, Joey Ortiz and Team Mexico. Joey Ortiz, the shortstop for Team Mexico, putting on a little defensive show in the World Baseball Classic. There is some good news on Jackson Chourio for his World Baseball Classic. He did not make the starting lineup today. He got hit by a pitch in an exhibition game the other day. X-rays were negative. He was said to be available today. I don't think he played at all, but I don't think it's something that has a longer-term concern. And then Bryce Terang and Team USA plays later tonight. They will open their round-robin play in the World Baseball Classic against Brazil. And so all that stuff going on out there. All right, so I do, well, maybe you don't know. Maybe it's your first time tuning in, and if it is, thank you. So on our I Love Mondays podcast, which is Monday through Friday, we're going to move to 10 o'clock for the live audience on Monday. We'll be at 10 in the morning going forward. So that starts on Monday. So just that little heads up. I do a daily 3 tops and a bottom. Now I'm going to stay just in this realm, because my 3 tops are rather simple. One, I love being back and doing this. It had been 6 months. since I had talked on a radio or a podcast about the daily goings on in the sports world. I tweeted about them, sent out the occasional shorter X video, but I hadn't been able to do it in 6 months. And I get it. It's how the industry works. Hadn't happened to me before, but that's the only top that I need to have on this Friday. I get to be, this is a get to job. It's always been a get to job, not a have to, not a got to. It is a get to opportunity. Always has been. I tried to never take it for granted. The cool things that I get to do in the sports world, and also that I get to do this and share thoughts and opinions on the goings on. And that's my job. So just on that front, I'm super thrilled to be back. There are so many people to thank, but one of them who you won't see is right over there. He's been there he was my first call when Kari and I talked about me doing this. And I said it on Monday. I was going to call somebody else. And Kari goes, "What are you doing? Call Ben." So I called Ben Bano, and I will just repeat what I said on Monday. Dude, thank you. Thanks for coming along. Thanks for holding my hand on getting through the stuff that I have no idea of what I'm doing, and that's the technical side. I appreciate your friendship, your support, and it's ongoing. So a big thank you to all the things you do.
Hey, my pleasure, Mike. I speak for all of your listeners when we're just glad to have you back on the air.
Well, thank you.
I'm just sitting over here like I'm in my car,
Yeah, right.
disagreeing with most of what you say.
Again.
But it's really great to have you back, man. Keep it up. Training wheels are coming off. You're going to be by yourself Monday, but you're going to shine. You're great.
Yeah, there's some people like watching the idea of a car wreck kind of in slow motion. So, and I really don't think I can be hurt in it, but you want to maybe have a little fun. Monday, when I go live at 10 a.m., it's going to be all of the stuff that you don't see is going to be, I'm doing it. So, I mean, it could be a classic podcast car wreck.
There's a reason why I programmed the "oh shit" button.
Yeah.
You might use it.
Right. I'm pretty sure I'm going to.
You're going to be fine.
Yeah. So we're looking forward to Monday. We moved to 10 a.m. Also need to thank Jeff Vilker. He is who I call Treadmill Boy. He was in on Tuesday. He'll be one of the super fans that's in on a regular basis, Treadmill Tuesdays. He won't be here next Tuesday. Got to fill in that spot. His name is Courtney Corning. Some of you maybe heard Courtney Corning. Courtney is also a longtime listener, many-time caller, and a friend. He's going to jump in Vilker's chair on Tuesday. Vinny Rottino is in every Thursday on the show, so he'll be back from Arizona, and he'll be in next Thursday, and other guests as we go through the week. So, and then obviously a thank you to my sponsors from Habish and Rotier to Potawatomi Sportsbook and Casino to Neuroscience Group and to M3 Insurance, because if they're not on the ride, I'm not on the ride. So I appreciate them, and I hope you will support our sponsors as you support the show as we go forward. No bottoms on this Friday. Just excited for a great weekend ahead. I'm going to go over to Milwaukee and do Bowling with the Chumps tomorrow, which is a Josh Albrecht fundraiser that he does every year. It's fantastic, and I'm looking forward to being there in Milwaukee. And I get to call bowling. They're doing a live stream of the stair step finals, and I get to call bowling on a live stream tomorrow. I've called hockey, football, basketball. Now I'm going to call bowling. Put it on the resume. So I'm looking forward to that, and I'll be back in the chair on Monday. Hope you all have a fantastic weekend. Thanks for being here with I Love Mondays, the podcast, and we will talk to you on Monday. Thanks for being here. Have a great weekend.
I love Mondays with Mike Heller.